Landon Hayes stood frozen in the doorway, rain hammering his shoulders, staring at the pregnant woman collapsed against the foreclosure notice nailed to her mansion door. Blood trickled from her palm where she'd clawed at the paper. The storm wasn't supposed to matter tonight, just another quick estimate, another job. But the terror in her eyes when she looked up changed everything. Her fiancé had vanished. The bank wanted the house. The baby was coming soon. And somehow, watching her try to stand alone in that storm, Landon knew walking away would haunt him forever. If you want to see how this story ends, stay until the final moment. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The windshield wipers couldn't keep up with the rain. Landon Hayes squinted through the glass, trying to make out the address scrawled on the work order crumpled against his steering wheel. 17 Meadowbrook Lane. The fancy part of town where he never got calls unless someone's contractor had screwed up so badly they were desperate enough to hire the guy who showed up in a 10-year-old truck. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Jamie's asking for you. Says he can't sleep." Landon's jaw tightened. His son was 6 years old and still couldn't make it through a thunderstorm without waking up terrified. "I know, buddy," he muttered to the empty cab. "I'll be home soon." He turned onto Meadowbrook Lane, and the houses transformed from normal to obscene. Brick facades gave way to stone columns. Manicured lawns stretched back into darkness. These people didn't just have money. They had the kind of wealth that made them forget what struggling looked like. Number 17 sat at the end of a curved driveway, partially hidden behind overgrown hedges that nobody had trimmed in months. The house itself was enormous, 3 stories of pale stone with tall windows that should have glowed warm against the storm. Instead, most of them were dark. Only a single light burned on the ground floor, barely visible through the downpour. Landon killed the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the rain pound the roof. Something felt wrong. The work order had been vague. Emergency repair consultation. Structural damage. But there was no emergency crew here. No other vehicles. Just his beat-up Silverado and a sleek black sedan parked at an angle near the front steps, like someone had abandoned it in a hurry. He grabbed his jacket and made a run for the covered porch. The rain soaked through his shoulders before he made it halfway. When he reached the door, he stopped. A yellow paper notice was nailed directly into the wood. Official bank letterhead. Foreclosure proceedings. Final notice before seizure of property. Jesus, Landon breathed. The door opened before he could knock. The woman standing there didn't match the house. She should have been wearing something expensive, something that screamed old money and inherited wealth. Instead, she wore an oversized sweater that hung off one shoulder and sweatpants with paint stains on the knees. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy knot. Her face was pale, drained of color, and her eyes, those eyes looked like someone had just told her the world was ending. She was pregnant, heavily pregnant, the kind of pregnant where every movement looked exhausting. "You're the contractor?" Her voice was steadier than Landon expected. "Landon Hayes. Got a call about structural damage." She stared at him for a beat too long, like she was trying to decide something. Then she stepped back. "Come in." The inside of the house was worse than the outside. The entryway opened into a massive space with a curved staircase and marble floors, but half the furniture was missing. Dark rectangles on the walls showed where paintings used to hang. Water stains bloomed across the ceiling in the corner, and Landon could hear the steady drip of a leak somewhere deeper in the house. Celeste Whitmore. She closed the door behind him and leaned against it like she needed the support. "I appreciate you coming out in this weather. You said it was an emergency." "It is." She gestured vaguely toward the stairs. "There's damage in the east wing. The roof's been leaking for weeks, and now part of the ceiling's sagging. I need to know if it's going to collapse." Landon pulled out his flashlight and notepad. "I'll take a look, but I gotta ask, you know there's a foreclosure notice on your door, right?" Her expression didn't change. "I'm aware. Just making sure, because if the bank's seizing the property, any work I do—" "I'll pay you tonight," Celeste interrupted. "Cash. I just need to know if the house is safe for the next 2 weeks." 2 weeks. Landon studied her face, the way her hand rested protectively over her stomach. "When are you due?" 12 days. She met his eyes, daring him to say something. "I'm not leaving before then." The rain hammered harder against the windows. Somewhere in the house, something creaked. "All right," Landon said quietly. "Show me the damage." The east wing was a disaster. Water had been dripping through a compromised section of roof for so long that the ceiling plaster had turned soft and black with mold. The hardwood floor was warped, buckling in waves. Landon climbed onto a chair and pressed his hand against the ceiling. It gave under his touch, spongy and weak. "This whole section needs to be torn out and replaced," he said. "The roof's got to be patched before we even think about the interior. You're looking at maybe $10,000 in materials alone, plus labor." Celeste stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame. "How long would it take?" 3 weeks if everything goes smooth. Longer if we hit problems, which we will." "I don't have 3 weeks." "Then you don't have a choice." Landon climbed down and faced her. "Look, I don't know what's going on here, but this isn't just cosmetic. If that ceiling comes down, it could hurt someone. Hurt you." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the water-stained floor. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "He took everything." Landon waited. "My fiancé." Celeste's hand tightened on the doorframe. "Bradley. We were supposed to get married in the spring. He handled all the finances, said I shouldn't worry about it. Turns out he was moving money into offshore accounts for months. When I found out I was pregnant, he just—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "He left. Cleaned out everything and disappeared." The pieces started falling into place. The empty rooms. The foreclosure notice. The desperation in her voice when she'd called about the emergency repair. "Your family," Landon started carefully. "Can't they help?" Celeste's laugh was bitter and sharp. "My family disowned me when I told them I wanted to live on my own terms instead of playing the dutiful heiress. They said I'd come crawling back eventually. I'd rather lose the house than prove them right." Thunder rolled overhead, close enough to rattle the windows. "The bank gave me 30 days to settle the debt, or vacate," Celeste continued. "That was 3 weeks ago. I've been selling everything that isn't nailed down, but it's not enough. Nothing's enough." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "I know you probably think I'm stupid. Rich girl playing pretend, getting exactly what she deserves. I don't think that. Everyone else does." Landon picked up his flashlight and notepad. "I'm going to check the roof access, see how bad the damage is up there." "Why?" Celeste's voice cracked slightly. "Celeste's, I just told you I can't pay for the work. You said you could pay me for tonight. I'm going to give you an honest assessment. What you do with that information is up to you." He moved past her into the hallway, but her voice stopped him. "Why are you being kind to me?" Landon turned. She looked so small standing there in the enormous house, one hand on her stomach, trying to hold together pieces that kept breaking. "Because someone was kind to me once," he said, "when I didn't deserve it." The roof was worse than he expected. Landon climbed through the attic access and immediately felt the wind tearing through gaps in the shingles. Whole sections were missing. The rain poured in freely, pooling on the attic floor before seeping down through the ceiling below. He could see stars through one particularly large hole. This wasn't neglect. This was sabotage. Someone had deliberately torn sections of the roof apart. The edges were too clean, too intentional. Bradley hadn't just abandoned Celeste. He'd made sure she'd face one disaster after another in his absence. Landon's phone buzzed. Another text from his mother. "Storm's getting worse. Jamie's really scared." He typed back quickly. "On my way soon. Tell him Dad's okay." When he climbed back down, Celeste was sitting on the floor of the hallway, her back against the wall. She looked exhausted. "Well?" she asked. Landon sat down across from her, his back against the opposite wall. "Someone pulled shingles off your roof recently. This isn't weather damage." Her face went very still. "Bradley, you think he'd do something like that? I think he'd do anything to make sure I couldn't stay here." Celeste's voice was flat, emotionless. "He told me once that I'd never make it on my own, that I was too weak, too dependent. I think he wants to be right." The house groaned around them, settling deeper into the storm. "I can patch the roof temporarily," Landon heard himself say. "Tonight. Stop the immediate water damage. Won't be pretty, but it'll hold until you figure out what you're doing next." Celeste's eyes widened. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm offering. It's almost midnight in a storm." "Yeah." Landon stood and offered her his hand. "So I should probably get started." "Ban might shoot the one." She stared at his hand like it was the strangest thing she'd ever seen. Then slowly, she reached up and let him pull her to her feet. I don't understand why you're doing this, she said. Maybe I don't either, Landon admitted. But I've got a kid at home who's terrified of storms. And I keep thinking about him being scared and alone and nobody coming to help. So yeah, I'm going to patch your roof, even if it's stupid. Celeste's eyes were shining, but she blinked hard and turned away. I'll get you some coffee. Make it strong. Working on a roof in a thunderstorm was exactly as miserable as it sounded. The rain came down in sheets, turning every surface slick and dangerous. Lightning flashed close enough that Landon could smell ozone in the air. His hands went numb within the first 20 minutes, but he kept moving. Tarp, nails, hammer. The repetitive work was almost meditative. Each section he covered was one less way for the storm to destroy what was left of Celeste's life. She appeared on the roof after an hour, holding a thermos of coffee and wearing a rain jacket that barely fit over her stomach. You shouldn't be up here, Landon shouted over the wind. Neither should you. She handed him the thermos. Take a break before you fall off. They sat under the partial shelter of an intact section, rain drumming all around them. The coffee was perfect, hot and bitter and exactly what he needed. Your son, Celeste said. How old? 6, Jamie. His mother? Died when he was 2. Car accident. Landon took another sip of coffee, the familiar ache settling in his chest. Just us now. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. He looked out at the storm. That's why I can't walk away from someone who needs help. Because I remember what it felt like when everyone else did. Celeste was quiet for a long moment. Then, my family threw a party when I told them about the baby. A huge party with all their society friends. They announced that I was finally settling down, finally being responsible. Then Bradley stood up and said he couldn't do it anymore, that I was too much work, too complicated. He walked out in front of everyone. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Nobody followed him. They all just stood there staring at me like I'd ruined the evening. That's when they disowned you? No, that's when I told them all to go to hell. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. They disowned me the next day. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face for a split second. She looked fierce and terrified and completely alone. The baby's going to be fine, Landon said. You're going to be fine. You don't know that. No, but I know you're tougher than you think. He stood, handing back the thermos. Get back inside before you catch something. I've got maybe 2 more hours of work. She didn't move. Landon? Yeah? Thank you. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was enormous. He just nodded and went back to work. No. By the time Landon finished, it was past 3 in the morning. The tarp wouldn't hold forever, maybe a week if the weather stayed calm, but it would buy Celeste some time. He climbed down exhausted, soaked to the bone, and found her waiting in the kitchen. It's done, he said. She slid an envelope across the counter. 500 for tonight. That's too much. It's not enough. Celeste's jaw was set. I know what emergency overnight labor costs. Landon took the envelope, too tired to argue. Get someone out here to do a proper repair as soon as you can. This is just a Band-Aid. I will. She hesitated. Can I ask you something? Sure. If I needed more help with the house, would you come back? Every practical instinct told him to say no. This woman was drowning in debt and legal problems. Her ex had sabotaged the property. The house was falling apart. Getting involved would be messy and complicated and probably end badly. But he kept thinking about Jamie, terrified and alone in a storm, waiting for someone to come home. Yeah, Landon said, I'd come back. The relief on her face was almost painful to witness. Go home to your son, Celeste said softly. He needs you more than I do right now. Landon nodded and headed for the door. As he stepped out into the dying storm, he heard her voice one more time. Landon? He turned. I hope someone was really kind to you when you needed it. She was, Landon said, thinking of Jamie's mother, of everything she'd been before the world took her away. She really was. He drove home through empty streets, the rain finally letting up. The envelope sat on the passenger seat, and he tried not to think about the woman standing alone in that massive house, waiting for the next disaster to hit. His mother was asleep on the couch when he got home. Jamie was curled up under a blanket, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Landon carried him to bed, tucking him in carefully. "Dad?" Jamie mumbled, half asleep. "I'm here, buddy." "Was the storm bad?" "Yeah, pretty bad." Landon smoothed his son's hair back. "But we made it through." "We always do," Jamie said, and fell back asleep. Landon stood there for a long time, watching his son breathe. Then he went to his own room, peeled off his wet clothes, and collapsed into bed. His phone buzzed one last time. An unknown number. "The tarp is holding. Thank you for giving me one less thing to be afraid of tonight." He saved the number and typed back, "You're welcome. Get some rest." Bullshit. Then he closed his eyes and tried not to think about how badly this was probably going to end. 3 days passed before Celeste called again. Landon was on another job site, arguing with a supplier about lumber prices, when his phone rang. "The tarp's coming loose," she said without preamble, "and there's water in the basement now. I think a pipe burst. I'll be there in an hour." "Landon, I can't keep paying you for emergency calls." "Then don't. I'll send you an invoice when we figure out what's wrong." The silence stretched out. "Why are you doing this?" "Because nobody else is," he said, and hung up before she could argue. The pipe situation was actually worse than the roof. A main line had frozen and cracked during the storm, flooding one corner of the basement with 3 inches of standing water. Landon waded through it, checking the foundation for damage. Celeste appeared at the top of the stairs, looking exhausted. "How bad?" "Could be worse. Pipe's fixable. We need to pump this water out before it causes foundation issues, but I don't see any major cracks yet. I'll call a pumping service." "Already did. They'll be here in 20 minutes. Landon climbed the stairs, wringing water out of his sleeves. "You look like hell." "Thanks. Always wanted to hear that while very pregnant." "You know what I mean." He studied her face, dark circles under her eyes, a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there 3 days ago. "You sleeping?" "Not really. Every time I close my eyes, I think about what's going to break next." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "This house is falling apart, and I can't stop it. I can't fix it. I can't even afford to fix it properly." "So why stay?" The question hung between them. Celeste leaned against the doorframe, one hand on her stomach. "Because if I leave, Bradley wins. He gets to be right about me, about everything." Her voice dropped. "And because I don't have anywhere else to go. This house might be destroying me, but it's still mine, for now." Landon understood that. The stubborn refusal to give up, even when giving up was the smart choice. He'd felt it after Jamie's mother died, when everyone told him to let his parents take custody because he couldn't handle it alone. He'd fought anyway, and somehow they'd survived. "All right," he said, "then we fix what we can and we keep you safe until the baby comes. After that, you make your decision." "We?" Celeste raised an eyebrow. "I'm already here. Might as well finish what I started." "I really can't pay you properly." "Then pay me what you can? Or don't. I'll figure it out." Landon grabbed his toolbox. "Right now, I'm going to resecure that tarp before the next storm hits. You're going to sit down and drink water and stop looking like you're about to collapse. You're very bossy for a contractor." "Yeah, well, you're very stubborn for someone whose house is flooding." The ghost of a real smile crossed her face. "Fair point. During this..." The pumping crew arrived and started clearing the basement. Landon spent the afternoon resecuring the tarp and checking the rest of the roof for weak points. When he came down, he found Celeste in the kitchen, staring at a stack of legal documents spread across the counter. "Bank sent more paperwork," she said flatly. "They want an answer by Friday." "What are you going to tell them?" "I don't know." She picked up one of the papers, then set it down like it burned her fingers. "I've sold almost everything. The car's going up for auction next week. I've got maybe 8,000 left. The debt is 43,000. Landon did the math in his head. It wasn't good. "Your family really won't help?" "They made it very clear. Come back on their terms, or don't come back at all." Celeste's hands were shaking slightly. "I called my father yesterday. Told him about the foreclosure. You know what he said? He said, "Perhaps this will teach you the value of family support." She laughed, sharp and bitter, like this is some kind of lesson. Like I deserved to lose everything because I wanted to make my own choices. Landon thought about his own parents, who'd moved in with him after Jamie's mother died, who'd given up their retirement to help him raise his son, who'd never once made him feel like he owed them anything. "Your family's wrong," he said. "Doesn't matter if they're wrong. They're rich." Celeste pushed the papers away. "Money wins. It always wins." "Not always." She looked at him, something fierce and desperate in her eyes. "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, what's the point?" The baby kicked, visible even through Celeste's sweater. She put her hand over the movement, and Landon watched something shift in her expression, fear melting into determination. "I'm not giving up," she said quietly. "Not on the house, not on her." "Her?" "The baby. It's a girl." Celeste's smile was small but real. "I'm having a daughter." Something warm and unexpected settled in Landon's chest. He'd been thinking of the baby as an abstract concept, a reason Celeste needed help. But a daughter made it real, made it personal. "Then we'll make sure she has a home to come back to," he said. "We?" "Yeah, we." Celeste's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back furiously. "You barely know me." "I know enough." Landon started gathering his tools. "I'll be back tomorrow morning. Gonna start on that ceiling repair before it gets worse." "Landon, don't argue. You're tired, I'm tired, and we both know that ceiling's not going to fix itself." He paused at the door. "Get some sleep tonight. Actual sleep. Doctor's orders." "You're not a doctor." "Close enough." He smiled, surprising himself. "See you tomorrow, Celeste." He left before she could protest again, climbing into his truck as the sun set behind the massive broken house. His phone buzzed immediately. Jamie, asking when he'd be home for dinner. "On my way now, buddy." "Want pizza?" "Yes." Landon smiled and pulled out of the driveway. In his rearview mirror, he could see Celeste standing in the doorway, one hand on her stomach, watching him leave. He'd come back tomorrow, and the day after that, and however many days it took to make sure she and her daughter made it through this storm. He didn't know why he was so certain about it. Maybe it was the memory of standing alone at Jamie's mother's funeral, feeling like the world had ended. Maybe it was the look in Celeste's eyes when she talked about her daughter. Or maybe it was just the simple fact that sometimes helping someone else was the only thing that made sense in a world that rarely made sense at all. Either way, he was in this now, for better or worse. He just hoped it wouldn't destroy them both. The next morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of weather that made everything feel heavier than it should. Landon pulled up to the house at 7:30, finding Celeste already awake and standing on the porch with a mug of tea. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. "You're early," she said. "Figured I'd get started before Jamie wakes up wanting breakfast." Landon grabbed his toolbox from the truck bed. "My mom's got him until noon. You don't have to explain your schedule to me." "I know. Just making conversation." He climbed the steps and noticed the shadows under her eyes had darkened. "You didn't sleep." "How can you tell?" "Because you look exactly like I did for the first year after my wife died." Landon set down the toolbox. "Couldn't shut my brain off. Kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong." Celeste took a sip of tea, her hands wrapped tight around the mug. "Did it get better?" "Eventually. Took a while, though." He pulled out his work gloves. "You eat anything this morning?" "I'm not hungry." That wasn't the question. She shot him a look that was half annoyance, half amusement. "You're really persistent." "Yeah, I've heard that before." Landon headed inside, calling back over his shoulder. "Make yourself some toast or something. Can't have you passing out while I'm tearing up your ceiling." He heard her mutter something that sounded like bossy contractor, but didn't catch the rest. The damaged ceiling in the east wing looked even worse in daylight. The water stains had spread, and when Landon pressed against the plaster, his hand went straight through. "Fantastic," he muttered, pulling his hand back. Bits of wet plaster clung to his glove. The work was messy and slow. He had to cut away all the damaged sections, bag the moldy debris, and check the structural beams for rot. By 9 o'clock, he was covered in dust and plaster powder, his lungs aching from the particles in the air. Celeste appeared in the doorway, holding a plate with toast and jam. Truce? Truce. Landon climbed down from the ladder and took the plate. Thanks. They sat on the floor beneath the gaping hole in the ceiling, eating in silence. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Another storm's coming, Celeste said quietly. Saw the forecast. Should hit tomorrow night. Of course it should. She leaned her head back against the wall, exhausted. I used to love storms. When I was a kid, I'd sit by the window and watch the lightning. Thought it was beautiful. And now? Now it just feels like the universe trying to destroy what's left of my life. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dramatic, I know. Not really. Feels pretty accurate from where I'm sitting. Celeste turned to look at him, something vulnerable in her expression. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Your wife, what was her name? Sarah. The name still hurt to say out loud even after 4 years. We met in college, got married way too young. Everyone said it wouldn't last. Landon smiled despite himself. We made it 7 years before the accident. What was she like? Nobody had asked him that in a long time. Most people just offered condolences and changed the subject, like talking about Sarah would make the grief worse instead of better. Stubborn, Landon said. Smart. She'd argue with me about everything just to prove she could win. Drove me crazy. He picked at the toast. She wanted to be a teacher. Was finishing her degree when Jamie came along. The accident happened on her way to a night class. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. He stood, brushing crumbs off his jeans. But Jamie looks just like her. Got her smile, her stubbornness. So she's still here in a way. Celeste was quiet for a moment, one hand resting on her stomach. I keep wondering what my daughter's going to look like. If she'll have Bradley's eyes or mine. Then I remember that he's gone, and she's never going to know her father, and I feel like I've already failed her. You haven't failed anyone. How do you know? Because you're still here, still fighting. Landon picked up his tools. That's not failure. That's survival. He went back to work before she could respond, ripping out more damaged plaster and trying not to think about how easy it would be to care about this woman and her unborn daughter. How easy it would be to get involved in something that was absolutely none of his business. By noon, he'd cleared most of the damaged ceiling and exposed the structural beams beneath. 2 of them showed signs of water damage and would need to be reinforced or replaced. The job was getting bigger by the hour. His phone rang. Jamie's face lit up the screen. Hey, buddy. Dad, when are you coming home? See? Jamie's voice was small and worried. Couple more hours. Why, what's wrong? Grandma says there's another storm coming. A big one. Landon glanced at Celeste, who was watching him from the doorway. Yeah, there is, but we'll be okay. Remember what I told you about storms? They're just weather. They can't hurt us if we're safe inside. That's right. And we've got a good house with a strong roof. Nothing's going to happen. Promise? The word hit harder than it should have. Landon thought about all the promises he'd made to Sarah that he couldn't keep. All the things he'd said would be okay that turned out to be anything but. I promise, he said anyway, because Jamie needed to hear it. After he hung up, Celeste was still standing there. He sounds sweet. He's terrified of storms. Has been since Sarah died. Landon packed up his tools. The accident happened during a thunderstorm. He was in the car, walked away without a scratch, but he can't get past it. That's awful. Yeah. He zipped up his toolbox. Look, I need to head out. Spend some time with him before the weather hits. But I'll come back tomorrow morning and keep working on this. You don't have to. I know, but I'm going to anyway. He paused at the door. Do me a favor. If the storm gets bad tomorrow night, call me, even if nothing's wrong, just so I know you're okay. Celeste's expression shifted, something soft and uncertain crossing her face. Why do you care so much? I don't know, Landon admitted, but I do. He left before she could say anything else, climbing into his truck as the first drops of rain started to fall. In the rearview mirror, he saw her standing on the porch, watching him drive away. Jamie was waiting by the window when Landon got home. The moment he walked through the door, his son launched himself into his arms. "You're back. Told you I would be." Landon held him tight, breathing in the familiar smell of kid shampoo and syrup from breakfast. "How about we build a fort in the living room? Make it stormproof." Jamie's face lit up. "Really? Really? Go get the blankets." His mother appeared in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. "You look exhausted." "I'm fine, Mom. You're working too much." "This job you're on, is it paying well?" Landon thought about the envelope Celeste had given him, the $500 that was way more than the job was worth. "Well enough." "Landon, it's complicated." His mother studied him for a long moment, the way only a mother could. "Is this about that woman in the big house on Meadowbrook? The one everyone's talking about? People need to mind their own business, so it is about her." His mother's expression softened. "Be careful. I know you want to help, but getting involved in someone else's mess, I know what I'm doing. Do you?" She walked over and put her hand on his shoulder. "Because the last time you tried to save someone who didn't want to be saved, it nearly destroyed you." She was talking about the year after Sarah died, when Landon had tried to help one of his clients who was going through a divorce. He'd done extra work for free, testified on her behalf in court, gone way beyond what any contractor should do. And when it was over, she'd accused him of overstepping, of making things worse. He'd lost the client and nearly lost his business. "This is different," Landon said. "How?" "I don't know, it just is." His mother sighed. "Just promise me you'll think about Jamie, about what happens if this goes wrong." "I'm always thinking about Jamie." "I know you are. That's what worries me." She kissed his forehead like he was still a kid. "Go build your fort. Spend time with your son. The rest of the world can wait." Jamie came running back with an armload of blankets, and for the next 2 hours, Landon let himself forget about foreclosure notices and damaged ceilings and pregnant women standing alone in empty mansions. He built a fort with his son, ate grilled cheese sandwiches, and pretended the storm gathering outside didn't exist. But when Jamie fell asleep that night, curled up in the fort with his dinosaur, Landon found himself staring at his phone, at Celeste's number saved in his contacts. He typed out a message 3 times and deleted it 3 times before finally sending something simple. "Storm's supposed to hit around midnight. You all set?" The reply came almost immediately. "As set as I can be." "Thank you for asking. Call if you need anything. I will." Landon set down his phone and tried to sleep, but his mind kept spinning. He kept thinking about Celeste alone in that house, waiting for the next disaster. Kept thinking about Jamie's fear of storms and Sarah's promises that everything would be okay. Kept thinking that maybe his mother was right. Maybe he was getting involved in something that was going to blow up in his face. But when his phone rang at 1 in the morning, he answered on the first ring. "Landon," Celeste's voice was shaking. "I'm sorry to call so late, but the tarp came loose. Water's pouring into the east wing again, and I can't get up there to fix it. Stay inside. I'm on my way." He was out the door in under 2 minutes, leaving a note for his mother on the kitchen counter. The storm was worse than the forecast had predicted. Rain came down so hard he could barely see the road. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, turning the world white and stark. The drive to Meadowbrook Lane felt like it took forever. When he finally pulled up to the house, he found Celeste standing in the front doorway, soaked through and shivering. "What the hell are you doing outside?" But Landon shouted over the wind, trying to see if the tarp was still attached. "Get back inside before you get struck by lightning." He grabbed his ladder from the truck and fought his way to the side of the house. The tarp was half torn away, flapping wildly in the wind. Water poured through the exposed section of roof, straight into the damaged room below. Climbing the ladder in the storm was suicidal. The wind kept trying to rip him off, and the rain made every rung slick and dangerous. But Landon kept climbing, because the alternative was letting Celeste's house flood while he stood around being sensible. He managed to grab the loose edge of the tarp and wrestle it back into place, hammering nails through the reinforced corners with hands that could barely feel the hammer. Lightning flashed close enough that he smelled the ozone, felt the hair on his arms stand up. "Landon, get down from there!" Celeste was at the base of the ladder, looking up at him with wild eyes. "Almost done." 1 more nail, 2 more. The tarp caught the wind like a sail, nearly throwing him off the ladder. But he held on, finishing the last corner and scrambling back down before the storm could kill him. The moment his feet hit the ground, Celeste grabbed his arm. Are you insane? You could have died up there. Probably. Landon was breathing hard, adrenaline making his hands shake. But your roof's covered. I don't care about the roof. I care about you not getting electrocuted on my property. They stood there in the rain, staring at each other. Her hand was still on his arm, her face pale and furious and terrified all at once. You called me, Landon said quietly. I came. That's how this works. This is insane. Yeah, it really is. She didn't let go of his arm. Come inside, you're freezing. They stumbled into the house together, dripping water all over the marble floor. Celeste disappeared and came back with towels, throwing one at Landon's head. You're going to catch pneumonia, she said. I've survived worse. That's not reassuring. She wrapped herself in a towel, shivering hard. I shouldn't have called you. This isn't your problem. Then whose problem is it? Mine. Just mine. Well, too bad. I'm involved now. Landon dried his face and looked at her. Really looked at her. You can't do this alone, Celeste. You're 9 months pregnant, the house is falling apart, and you're running out of time. Let me help. Why? The word came out desperate, almost angry. Why do you keep helping me? Because nobody helped me, Landon said. When Sarah died, everyone had advice. Everyone had opinions. But nobody actually showed up. Nobody fixed things, or stayed late, or just sat with me when I couldn't handle being alone. He dropped the towel. I swore if I ever saw someone drowning the way I was drowning, I'd do something about it. So here I am, doing something about it. Celeste's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to let people help me. Yeah, I noticed. Landon smiled despite himself. But you called me tonight. That's a start. She wiped at her eyes, frustrated. I hate crying. Then stop trying so hard to be strong all the time. You're allowed to fall apart. If I fall apart, I won't be able to put myself back together. Then I'll help with that too. The storm raged outside, shaking the windows. Celeste looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. I don't deserve this. Your help. Your time. That's not your call to make. Landon, get some sleep, he interrupted. I'm going to check the rest of the house, make sure nothing else is leaking. Then I'm camping out on your couch until the storm passes. You don't have to do that. I know, but I'm doing it anyway. He grabbed his flashlight. Argue with me in the morning when you're not exhausted. He didn't wait for her response, just headed deeper into the house to check for damage. Behind him, he heard her whisper something that sounded like thank you, but he pretended not to hear. The rest of the night passed in strange, quiet intervals. Landon checked every room, every window, every potential leak. He found 2 more spots where water was seeping in and patched them temporarily with caulk and plastic sheeting. Celeste fell asleep on the living room couch around 3, and Landon covered her with a blanket before settling into the armchair across from her. He should have gone home, should have checked on Jamie, but something kept him there, watching over this woman and her unborn daughter while the storm tried to tear the house apart. Around dawn, the rain finally stopped. Landon's phone buzzed with messages from his mother. Jamie's fine. He slept through most of it. I assume you're at that house again. Be careful. He typed back quickly. Storm's over, heading home soon. But he didn't move. He sat there watching Celeste sleep, her hand resting protectively over her stomach, and wondered what the hell he was doing. Wondered if his mother was right, and he was setting himself up for disaster. Wondered if he cared enough to stop. Celeste woke around 7, blinking in the gray morning light. It took her a moment to realize where she was, and another moment to notice Landon sitting across from her. You stayed, she said, her voice rough with sleep. Yeah. All night? Seemed like the right thing to do. She sat up slowly, wincing. Everything hurts. You slept on a couch for 4 hours. What did you expect? Landon stood and stretched, his back cracking. I'm going to make coffee. You want tea? Coffee sounds better. Can't have caffeine. You're pregnant. 1 cup won't kill the baby. Nice try. You're getting tea. He headed to the kitchen before she could argue, finding the kettle and tea bags exactly where she'd left them. The kitchen was enormous and mostly empty, just like the rest of the house. A few dishes in the sink, A single box of crackers on the counter, evidence of a life being dismantled piece by piece. Celeste appeared in the doorway, wrapped in the blanket from the couch. My family used to throw dinner parties in this kitchen. 20, 30 people. Caterers and servers and elaborate menus. But she looked around like she was seeing ghosts. Now it's just me and a box of saltines. Saltines aren't so bad. They're depressing. They're practical. Landon handed her the tea. And they don't judge you for eating them at 3 in the morning. That got a real smile out of her. Small, but real. They drank in silence, standing in the enormous kitchen while morning light filtered through the windows. Outside, the storm had left debris scattered across the lawn, branches and leaves and pieces of things that used to be whole. I need to tell you something, Celeste said finally. The bank called yesterday. They're moving up the foreclosure timeline. I have until next Friday to settle the debt or they're seizing the property. That's 6 days. I know. You got a plan? Not really. I've sold everything worth selling. I've applied for loans and been rejected by every bank in the state. She set down her tea, her hands shaking slightly. I'm out of options. Landon thought about his own savings, about the money he'd been setting aside for Jamie's college fund. It wasn't enough to cover Celeste's debt, but it would help. Make a dent. Don't, Celeste said, reading his expression. Whatever you're thinking, don't. I wasn't thinking anything. You're a terrible liar. She crossed her arms, the blanket slipping off one shoulder. I won't take your money, Landon. You have a son. You have your own life. I won't let you destroy that for me. Who said anything about destroying? I did. Because that's what happens when people try to save me. They get pulled under too. Her voice cracked. Bradley used to say I was a black hole, that I sucked the life out of everything around me. Maybe he was right. He wasn't. How do you know? Because I'm still here, Landon said simply. And I don't feel sucked dry. I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Celeste stared at him, tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't understand you. Yeah, well, join the club. He set down his coffee. I need to get home, check on Jamie, but I'll be back this afternoon to finish the ceiling work. Landon, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, but I want to. There's a difference. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, leaving her standing in that enormous empty kitchen. As he drove home through streets littered with storm debris, he tried not to think about the calendar counting down to foreclosure, tried not to think about how badly he wanted to fix this for her, tried not to think about how close he was to caring about Celeste Whitmore in a way that had nothing to do with construction and everything to do with the way she looked at him like he was the only solid thing in her collapsing world. Jamie was eating cereal when Landon walked in. His mother took one look at him and shook her head. You look like you haven't slept in days. I slept some. In a chair, I'm guessing. The chair was fine. His mother handed him a plate of eggs. This woman you're helping, is she worth it? Landon thought about Celeste standing in the rain, furious at him for climbing the ladder. Thought about the way she'd fallen asleep on the couch, with her hand on her stomach, protecting a daughter who hadn't even been born yet. Yeah, he said. She is. Then I hope she knows how lucky she is. Landon ate his eggs and didn't mention that luck had nothing to do with it. That Celeste's world was falling apart and there was nothing lucky about any of it. That he was starting to realize he'd do just about anything to keep her from going under, even if it meant going under himself. The next 3 days fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal, which should have been Landon's first warning that everything was about to fall apart. He'd arrive at Celeste's house each morning around 8, work until noon, go home to spend time with Jamie, then return in the afternoon until dark. The ceiling repair was taking longer than expected because every time he pulled away damaged plaster, he found more problems underneath. Rotted beams, compromised wiring, a whole section of insulation that had turned into a breeding ground for mold. Celeste watched him work with a mixture of gratitude and guilt that made Landon's chest ache. She'd try to help, handing him tools or holding the ladder steady, but her pregnancy made even simple tasks exhausting. By the 3rd day, Landon had convinced her to just sit and keep him company instead. Tell me about Jamie's mother again, Celeste said on Wednesday afternoon. She was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, one hand absently rubbing her stomach. What was the moment you knew you loved her? Landon paused, hammer in hand. Nobody ever asked him questions like that. College party. She was arguing with some guy about environmental policy, completely destroying his points one by one. I just stood there watching her, thinking she was the smartest person I'd ever met. He smiled at the memory. Asked her out right there. She said no. She said no? 3 times. Finally wore her down on the 4th try. He went back to hammering. She told me later she wanted to make sure I was serious, that I wasn't just some guy who'd give up the first time things got hard. Were you? Serious? Yeah, I was. The admission still hurt even after all this time. Married her 2 years later. Best decision I ever made. Celeste was quiet for a moment. Bradley proposed to me after 6 months. Everyone said it was too fast, but I thought I'd finally found someone who wanted me for me, not for my family's money. Her laugh was bitter. Turns out he wanted the money after all, just took a more creative approach to getting it. You report him to the police? With what evidence? He was smart about it, made everything look legal, joint accounts, authorized transfers, business investments that mysteriously failed. She shifted uncomfortably. My lawyer says I could file charges, but it would take years to sort out, and I'd probably lose. Meanwhile, I'm losing the house in 6 days. Landon climbed down from the ladder and sat next to her on the floor. What are you going to do? After Friday? I don't know, find an apartment somewhere, have the baby, figure out how to be a single mother with no money and no family. She said it matter-of-factly. She said it like she was reading a grocery list instead of describing the collapse of her entire life. Should be fun. You could ask your family for help. No. The word was sharp, final. I'd rather live in my car than crawl back to them. Even for your daughter? Celeste's hand tightened on her stomach. Especially for my daughter. I won't raise her in that world. All that money, all that privilege, and everyone's miserable. My parents' marriage is a business arrangement. My brother married a woman he can't stand because she had the right last name. That's not a life. That's a prison sentence with a trust fund. Landon understood that kind of stubbornness. He'd felt it himself when people told him he couldn't raise Jamie alone. When his wife's parents had suggested he give them custody, just temporarily, until he got back on his feet. The fury he'd felt at the suggestion that he couldn't handle his own son still burned when he thought about it. Then we figure out plan B, he said. There is no plan B, that's the problem. There's always a plan B, just have to find it. Celeste turned to look at him, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. Why are you so determined to save me? I'm not trying to save you, I'm trying to help you save yourself. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah, because you're doing the work, I'm just holding the ladder steady. She laughed, but it turned into a sob halfway through. Before Landon could think better of it, he put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. She tensed for a second, then collapsed against him, crying into his shirt with the kind of desperation that came from holding everything in for too long. I'm so tired, she whispered. I'm so tired of fighting and losing. I know. I don't know if I can do this. Be a mother, be alone, be enough. You're already enough. Landon rested his chin on top of her head, feeling her shake against him. You got screwed over by someone who was supposed to love you, and you're still standing. That's not weakness. That's strength. It doesn't feel like strength. It never does, not when you're in the middle of it. They sat like that for a long time, her crying and him holding her, while the late afternoon light turned the damaged room gold and soft. When she finally pulled away, her face was blotchy and her eyes were swollen, but something in her expression had shifted, like she'd let go of something heavy she'd been carrying alone. Thank you, she said quietly. Anytime. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. Jamie wants to know if you're coming home for dinner. Landon checked the time and swore softly. It was almost 6. I have to go. Jamie's been asking about me. Go. I'm fine. You sure? Yeah, I'm good. Better, actually. Celeste wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Go take care of your son. Landon gathered his tools and headed for the door, but her voice stopped him. Landon? He turned. If you ever need someone to hold the ladder for you, I'm here. Just so you know. Something warm settled in his chest. I'll remember that. The drive home felt different somehow, lighter. like something had shifted between them, some invisible line they'd both been afraid to cross. Landon tried not to think too hard about what that meant, but his mind kept circling back to the way Celeste had felt in his arms, the way she'd trusted him enough to fall apart. Jamie was waiting by the window again. What? His face lighting up when Landon's truck pulled into the driveway. Dad, we made spaghetti. Yeah, is there enough for me? We made a lot. Grandma said you'd be hungry. His mother appeared in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. You're spending a lot of time at that house. The job's bigger than I thought. Is it the job you're worried about, or the woman? Landon didn't answer. He just scooped Jamie up and carried him to the dinner table, trying to ignore the knowing look in his mother's eyes. They ate spaghetti and talked about Jamie's day at school, and for a few hours, Landon let himself pretend everything was normal. But when Jamie went to bed and his mother cornered him in the kitchen, he knew he wasn't getting out of this conversation. She's getting to you, his mother said. It wasn't a question. I'm just helping with the house. Landon, I'm not blind. I see the way you talk about her, the way you drop everything when she calls. She sat down at the table and gestured for him to join her. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying be careful. You barely know this woman. I know enough. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you know she's in trouble and you want to fix it. That's not the same thing as actually knowing someone. What do you want me to do? Walk away? Let her lose everything? I want you to think about what happens when you can't fix it. When the bank takes the house and she moves on, and you're left having poured your time and energy and money into something that was never yours to save. His mother reached across the table and took his hand. I know you love Sarah. I know losing her broke something in you, but you can't fix every broken thing you see. I'm not trying to fix her. I'm trying to help. And what happens when she doesn't need your help anymore? What happens when the baby comes and she rebuilds her life and realizes she doesn't need a contractor who reminds her of the worst time in her life? The words hit harder than Landon expected. He pulled his hand back and stood. I don't know, but I can't just walk away. Then at least think about Jamie, about what he needs from you. I'm thinking about Jamie. I'm thinking that I want him to grow up knowing his father did the right thing, even when it was hard. His mother sighed. Just be careful. That's all I'm asking. Landon went to bed but couldn't sleep. His mother's words kept playing in his head, mixing with the memory of Celeste crying in his arms. He kept thinking about what would happen on Friday when the bank took the house, where she'd go, what she'd do, whether he'd ever see her again. Around midnight, his phone buzzed. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about Friday. He stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Me too. I'm scared. I know. What if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough? Landon sat up in bed, his thumbs hovering over the keyboard. Then he called her instead. She answered on the first ring. Hey. Hey, you okay? No, not really. Her voice was small, vulnerable in a way it never was during the day. I keep having this nightmare where the baby comes and I don't know what to do, where I'm holding her and she's crying and I can't make it stop. That's just fear talking. You'll figure it out. How do you know? Because I was terrified too. When Jamie was born, Sarah handed him to me and I froze, literally froze. This tiny person who needed me to know what I was doing, and I had no idea. But Landon smiled at the memory despite himself. But then he grabbed my finger, just wrapped his whole hand around it, and I thought, okay, we're doing this, one day at a time. What if one day at a time isn't enough? Then you do 1 hour at a time, 1 minute, whatever you need to survive. He leaned back against the headboard. But you won't be doing it alone. I'll help. My mom will help. You'll have people. I don't know how to have people. My whole life, everyone either wanted something from me or wanted to control me. I don't know how to just let someone help because they want to. Start by accepting that I'm not going anywhere. Even after Friday, even after the house is gone, I'm still here. You've got my number. You can call me at 3 in the morning if you need to. And I'll answer. That's what people do. That's what friends do. The silence on the other end stretched out so long Landon thought she'd hung up. Then he heard her take a shaky breath. I don't think I've ever had a real friend before. Well, now you do, so get used to it. She laughed, watery but real. You're really stubborn, you know that? Yeah, I've heard. They talked for another hour, about nothing and everything. About Jamie's fear of storms and Celeste's fear of becoming her mother. About the house and the baby and what came next. When they finally hung up, it was almost 2 in the morning, and Landon felt more awake than he had in days. Thursday arrived with clear skies and temperatures cold enough to see your breath. Landon showed up at the house to find a sleek black car parked in the driveway. Expensive. New. The kind of car that screamed money and power, and people who were used to getting what they wanted. He found Celeste standing in the entryway, facing a man in an expensive suit. The man was tall, polished, with the kind of practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm simply saying that this doesn't have to be difficult," the man was saying. "Sign the papers, accept the settlement, and everyone walks away clean. Get out of my house, Bradley." Landon's blood went cold. This was the ex-fiancée, the one who'd stolen everything and disappeared. Bradley's smile didn't waver. "Technically, it's not your house anymore. The bank takes possession tomorrow. I'm here to make you a very generous offer before that happens." "Generous?" Celeste's voice was ice. "You stole $40,000, and now you want to buy my silence for what? 10,000? 5? 30,000. Enough to get you settled somewhere new. All you have to do is sign an NDA and agree not to pursue any legal action." "Go to hell." That's when Bradley noticed Landon standing in the doorway. His expression shifted, calculating. "Who's this? The new boyfriend?" Bradley's tone was mocking. "That was fast, Celeste. Didn't take you long to move on. He's a contractor, working on the house." "Right, a contractor." Bradley looked Landon up and down like he was evaluating livestock. "Let me guess. Blue-collar savior complex? Thinks he can rescue the poor rich girl from her problems." Landon took a step forward. "You need to leave." "Or what? You'll throw me out?" Bradley's smile widened. "I'm on public property. The foreclosure notice was posted yesterday. I have every right to be here. Celeste asked you to leave. That's all the reason I need." Bradley turned back to Celeste, pulling out a folded document. "This is a one-time offer. $30,000 in exchange for your signature. After tomorrow, that number goes down to 0. Think about your baby, Celeste. Think about what you'll need when she comes. Pride doesn't pay for diapers. My daughter and I will be fine without your blood money." But will you? Because from where I'm standing, you're about to be homeless and broke. And him?" Bradley gestured at Landon. "He'll get tired of playing hero eventually. They always do." Landon moved before he could think about it, getting in Bradley's face. "Get out! Now!" Bradley held up his hands in mock surrender. "Easy there, hero. I'm going." He set the document on the entry table. "Offer stands until tomorrow at 5. After that, you're on your own." He looked at Celeste one more time. "I always told you that you couldn't make it without me. Looks like I was right." He walked out, and Landon had to physically stop himself from following. Every instinct screamed to chase the man down and make him pay for what he'd done. But Celeste grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Don't. He's not worth it." Landon watched through the window as Bradley climbed into his expensive car and drove away. "How the hell does that guy sleep at night?" "On a mattress stuffed with my money, probably." Celeste's voice was shaking, but when Landon turned to look at her, her eyes were dry. "He's right, you know. After tomorrow, I'll have nothing." "You'll have your daughter. That's not nothing." "It's not enough. Not when I can't afford to feed her or put a roof over her head." She picked up the document Bradley had left behind. $30,000. That's not even enough to cover what he stole, but it would keep us alive for a few months. You're not seriously considering his offer. Why not? Pride won't keep my daughter warm. Pride won't pay for medical bills when I can't afford insurance. Celeste's hands were trembling. "Maybe he's right. Maybe I can't do this alone." "You're not alone. You have me." "For how long?" She turned to face him, and the fear in her eyes was devastating. "How long before you realize this is too much? Before you go back to your normal life and leave me to figure this out?" "That's not going to happen." "You don't know that. Bradley promised the same thing, said he'd always be there. Then he walked away the second things got hard." "I'm not Bradley." "Then who are you?" The question came out almost desperate. "Because I don't understand why you're doing this, why you keep showing up, why you care." Landon didn't have a good answer. He just knew that walking away felt wrong in a way he couldn't explain. That seeing Celeste hurt made something in his chest twist and ache. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I'm here. That has to count for something." Celeste stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for something. Then she turned and walked toward the kitchen, leaving him standing in the entryway with Bradley's document still sitting on the table. Landon picked it up and read through it. 30,000 in exchange for silence. A binding agreement that Celeste would never pursue legal action, never speak publicly about what Bradley had done. It was a coward's contract, designed to let a guilty man walk away clean. He found Celeste sitting at the kitchen counter, her head in her hands. "You're not going to sign that, Linton," Landon said. "Why not? Give me one good reason." "Because you'll regret it. Every time you look at your daughter and remember that you let him get away with what he did, you'll regret it. At least she'll be fed and warm and safe. That's worth the regret." "Is it?" Landon set the document down in front of her. "Because I spent 4 years regretting that I wasn't in the car with Sarah, regretting that I couldn't save her. And I'm telling you right now, that kind of regret doesn't fade. It just sits there, eating at you, reminding you that you gave up." Celeste looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what else to do." "Then let me help you. Really help you. Not just with the house, but with all of it." "What? I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering." "Why?" The word broke in the middle. "Why would you do that for me?" Landon pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. "Because when Sarah died, I wanted to die too. I couldn't see past the grief, couldn't imagine a future that didn't hurt. But then Jamie needed me, and I had to keep going. Had to find a reason to get up every morning." He reached over and took her hand. "You're that reason right now, you and your daughter. Helping you helps me remember why it matters to keep fighting. That's not fair to you. I can't be your reason." "Too late. You already are." He squeezed her hand gently. "So don't sign Bradley's paper. Don't give him the satisfaction of winning. We'll figure something else out. What if we can't? Then we'll fail trying. But at least we won't give up." Celeste picked up the document with her free hand and stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, she tore it in half. Then in half again. Then again, until it was nothing but confetti scattered across the counter. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. We fight." Landon felt something loosen in his chest, something he hadn't realized was clenched tight. "Okay." They sat there in the quiet kitchen, hands linked across the counter while the afternoon light faded outside. Tomorrow the bank would take the house. Tomorrow everything would change. But right now, in this moment, they had each other. And somehow, that felt like enough. Friday morning arrived with the kind of cold that made everything hurt. Landon woke up to his phone buzzing at 6:30, a text from Celeste that just said, "Today's the day," followed by an emoji that looked more resigned than anything else. He texted back, "I'll be there at 8. But when he showed up at 7:45, there were already 2 vehicles in the driveway, a white sedan with bank logos on the door and a police cruiser parked behind it. His stomach dropped. Celeste was standing on the porch, arguing with a woman in a business suit, while a uniformed officer stood off to the side looking uncomfortable. "I understand the timeline, Celeste was saying, her voice tight and controlled. "But I'm 9 months pregnant, and I was told I had until 5 o'clock today. The paperwork clearly states possession transfers at 9 a.m., the woman replied. She had the kind of voice that suggested she'd had this conversation 100 times before and didn't care anymore. "You were sent multiple notices. I received 1 notice. 1, and it said 5 p.m. The woman pulled out a tablet and showed Celeste something on the screen. "This is the email confirmation sent to you on November 3rd. It clearly states 9 a.m. on December 20th. "I never got that email. That's not our problem. We need you to vacate the property within the hour, or we'll be forced to remove you." Landon climbed the steps. "What's going on?" The officer stepped forward. "Sir, this is private property. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "He's with me," Celeste said quickly. "Ma'am, if you're not out by 9, we have authorization to escort you off the premises." "She's pregnant," Landon said, trying to keep his voice level. "You're really going to throw a pregnant woman out of her house?" The bank representative's expression didn't change. The bank has been more than generous with the timeline. Ms. Whitmore has had 30 days to make arrangements. If she chose not to, that's her responsibility. Celeste's hands were shaking. I need to get my things. You have 58 minutes. Landon followed Celeste inside while the bank rep and the cop waited on the porch. The moment the door closed, Celeste's careful composure shattered. She braced herself against the wall, breathing hard. I can't believe this is happening. We need to pack, fast. Landon was already moving toward the stairs. What do you absolutely need? I don't know. I don't know what I need. I can't think. Okay. He came back and put his hands on her shoulders. Look at me. We're going to get through this. Right now, we focus on clothes, documents, and anything you can't replace. Everything else we figure out later. She nodded, but her eyes were unfocused. In shock, Landon realized. She was going into shock. Celeste, stay with me. Can you walk upstairs? Yeah, I think so. He helped her up to what must have been her bedroom. It was one of the few rooms that still had furniture. A bed, a dresser, a rocking chair in the corner. Baby clothes were folded in neat stacks on the dresser. A hospital bag sat packed by the door. Is that your go bag? Landon asked. For when the baby comes. Yeah. Good. That comes with us. What else? Celeste moved like she was underwater, pulling open drawers and staring at the contents like she didn't recognize them. Landon grabbed the hospital bag and started looking around for anything obviously important. He found a box of documents on the closet shelf. Birth certificate, passport, medical records. Those went into the bag. Celeste, I need you to pack clothes. Just grab what fits. She started mechanically pulling clothes from the dresser, sweatpants, t-shirts, a heavy sweater. Her movements were robotic, disconnected. Landon's phone rang. His mother. I heard what's happening, she said without preamble. Betty across the street called me, said there's police at that house. It's the foreclosure. They're kicking her out. Where's she going to go? I don't know yet. I'm trying to get her packed. There was a pause, then, bring her here. Landon stopped moving. What? Bring her to the house. She can stay in the guest room until she figures things out. Mom, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. But that woman is about to have a baby, and you're clearly not going to let her be homeless. So bring her here before you do something stupid like offer her your own bed. Despite everything, Landon felt himself smile. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Just get her out of there before this gets worse. He hung up and turned to Celeste. My mom says you can stay with us, guest room, until you figure out what's next. Celeste looked up from the pile of clothes she'd been staring at. I can't do that. You have a better option? No, but I can't just move in with you. That's insane. More insane than sleeping in your car 9 months pregnant? She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. I don't want to be a burden. Too late. You already are. Now pack faster. We've got 40 minutes. They worked in tense silence, shoving clothes and essentials into trash bags because Celeste didn't have suitcases anymore. She'd sold them weeks ago. Landon carried everything down to his truck, while Celeste did one last walk through the house. When she came back down, her face was pale but dry. No tears. Just a terrible, hollow acceptance. Okay, she said. I'm ready. They walked out together. The bank representative was waiting with a clipboard. We'll need your keys. Celeste pulled them from her pocket and held them for a moment, staring at the house key like it was something precious. Then she handed them over without a word. The locks will be changed by this afternoon. If you've left anything inside, you can contact the bank to arrange a supervised retrieval. There's nothing left, Celeste said quietly. Landon loaded the last bag into his truck and helped Celeste into the passenger seat. As they pulled away, he saw her turn to look back at the house one more time. Her expression was carefully blank, but her hand was pressed against the window like she was saying goodbye. The drive to his place took 15 minutes. Celeste didn't say a word the entire time, just stared out the window while her hand rested on her stomach. You okay? Landon asked. No, but I will be. She took a shaky breath. I have to be. His mother was waiting on the porch when they pulled up. Jamie stood beside her, bouncing on his toes with barely contained excitement. Is that her? Jamie asked as Landon helped Celeste out of the truck. Is that the baby lady? Jamie, inside, his mother said firmly. Then, to Celeste, I'm Linda. You must be exhausted. I'm Celeste, and thank you for this. I don't know what I would have done. You would have figured something out, but you don't have to. Linda gestured toward the house. Guest rooms on the first floor, bathrooms right next door. Make yourself at home. Landon carried Celeste's bags inside while Jamie followed, asking 1,000 questions. Are you really having a baby? When's it coming? Is it a boy or a girl? Can I see it when it's born? Jamie, Landon warned, but Celeste smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her all morning. It's a girl, and she's coming soon. Maybe a week or two. That's so cool. I never had a sister or a brother, just me. Well, you're pretty lucky then. You get all the attention. Jamie thought about this seriously. I guess, but sometimes it gets lonely. Something in Celeste's expression softened. Yeah, sometimes it does. The guest room was small but clean, with a double bed and a dresser and a window that looked out onto the backyard. Celeste stood in the doorway, taking it all in. This is too much, she said quietly. It's a room, Linda replied. You need a room. Stop overthinking it. I can pay rent. Not much, but something. Absolutely not. You save that money for the baby. Linda put a hand on Celeste's shoulder. My son clearly cares about you. That means I care about you. End of discussion. Celeste's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by getting some rest. You look like you're about to fall over. After Linda left, Landon helped Celeste unpack. They worked in silence, hanging clothes in the closet and arranging toiletries in the bathroom. When everything was put away, Celeste sat on the edge of the bed and just stared at her hands. I lost the house, she said. Not a question, just a statement of fact. Yeah, I really thought I could save it. Right up until this morning, I thought somehow I'd figure it out. Landon sat down beside her. I know. And now I'm living in your guest room like some charity case. You're not a charity case. You're someone going through a hard time who needed help. That's different. Is it? She looked at him, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. Because right now it feels like I'm exactly what Bradley said I was. Weak, dependent, unable to take care of myself. Bradley's an asshole who doesn't know what he's talking about. But what if he's right? What if I can't do this? Then you learn. Same way everyone else does. Landon took her hand. You're allowed to need help, Celeste. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you human. She squeezed his hand hard, like she was afraid to let go. I'm scared. I know. What if the baby comes and I don't know what to do? Then you call me, or my mom, or the hospital, or all three. He smiled. You're not doing this alone. I keep telling you that. I'm starting to believe you. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, while the afternoon light filtered through the window. Finally, Celeste lay down on the bed, exhausted beyond words. Landon pulled a blanket over her and was halfway to the door when her voice stopped him. Landon? Yeah? I'm glad it's you. Holding the ladder, I mean. He looked back at her. Me too. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended kind of peace. Celeste slept most of Saturday, her body finally allowing itself to rest after weeks of constant stress. Jamie appointed himself her unofficial guardian, checking on her every hour to make sure she was okay. Linda cooked enough food for an army and pretended not to notice when Celeste couldn't eat more than a few bites at a time. Sunday afternoon, Landon found Celeste sitting in the backyard, wrapped in a blanket despite the cold. He brought her a cup of tea and sat down beside her. You doing okay? Just thinking. About everything that's happened, how fast it all fell apart. She took the tea with a small smile of thanks. A month ago, I had a house, a fiancé, a plan. Now I have nothing. You have a daughter on the way. You have people who care about you. That's not nothing. I know. It just doesn't feel like enough sometimes. She sipped the tea. What happens when the baby comes? I can't stay here forever. I need to find a place, get a job, figure out childcare. I have no idea where to even start. One thing at a time. Right now, focus on staying healthy. Everything else we'll handle when we get there. Celeste turned to look at him. Why do you keep saying we? Because that's what this is. We're figuring it out together. But why? I keep asking and you keep deflecting. Why are you doing this? Landon was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. When Sarah died, I was so angry. At the driver who hit her. At the universe for taking her. At myself for not being there. He stared out at the yard. And then I looked at Jamie, and he was just this tiny person who needed me to be okay, even though I wasn't. So I pretended. Put on a good face, went through the motions, tried to be what he needed. That sounds exhausting. It was. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being pretend. I actually started to be okay again. He looked at her. Helping you reminds me that it's possible. To lose everything and still find a way forward. And maybe, if I can help you get there, it means Sarah's death wasn't for nothing. That something good can come from all that pain. Celeste's eyes were shining. That's a lot of weight to put on one person. I know. And if it's too much, tell me. I'll back off. Don't you dare. She set down her tea and took his hand. I need you. Maybe that makes me weak. Maybe it makes me dependent. But I don't care anymore. I need you, and I'm not ashamed to say it. Something shifted in Landon's chest. A wall he'd been holding up for 4 years, brick by careful brick, suddenly didn't feel so necessary anymore. I need you too, he admitted. Helping you has been the first thing that's felt right since Sarah died. So maybe we're both a little broken, and we're just helping each other stay standing. I can live with that. They sat in comfortable silence until the cold drove them back inside. Jamie was waiting in the living room with a board game spread out on the coffee table. Want to play? He asked Celeste hopefully. What's the game? Monopoly. But we made up our own rules because the real rules are boring. Celeste laughed, the first real laugh Landon had heard from her in days. Okay, I'm in. They played until dinner, and for a few hours, it almost felt normal, like they were a family instead of 3 people thrown together by circumstance and desperation. Monday morning broke cold and gray, with the weather report calling for snow by evening. Landon was making breakfast when Celeste appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face pale and pinched. Something's wrong, she said. Landon dropped the spatula. What kind of wrong? I don't know. I've been having cramps since yesterday, but now they're worse. And there's pressure, like the baby's sitting different. Linda appeared from the hallway, already reaching for her phone. How far apart are the cramps? I don't know. Maybe 15 minutes? Could be early labor. Could be false contractions. Linda was already dialing. We're calling your doctor. The doctor's office told them to come in immediately. Landon drove while Linda sat in the back with Celeste, timing contractions. They were getting closer together. 12 minutes, 10, 8. This is really happening, Celeste said, her voice tight with pain and fear. She's coming now. She's not supposed to come for another week. Babies don't follow schedules, Linda said calmly. My son here came 3 weeks early and turned out fine. Mostly. Thanks, Mom, Landon muttered, taking a corner too fast. At the hospital, they got Celeste checked in and into a room. The doctor examined her and confirmed what they already suspected. You're in active labor. 4 centimeters dilated. Baby's coming today. Celeste grabbed Landon's hand so hard he felt bones shift. I'm not ready. Nobody's ever ready, the doctor said with a kind smile. But you're going to be fine. As yet, the next few hours were a blur of contractions and monitors and nurses checking vital signs. Celeste handled the pain better than Landon expected, breathing through each contraction with fierce determination. Linda stayed in the room, coaching her through the worst of it while Landon held her hand and felt completely useless. You're doing great, he kept saying, because it was all he could think of. I'm dying. There's a difference. You're not dying. Easy for you to say. You're not the one being torn apart from the inside. Another contraction hit, and she squeezed his hand hard enough to cut off circulation. When it passed, she was crying. I can't do this. I can't. Yes, you can. No, I really can't. It hurts too much. I know, but you're halfway there. Just keep breathing. If you tell me to breathe one more time, I'm going to punch you. Despite everything, Landon smiled. There she is. I was wondering when you'd get mean. I'm not mean. I'm in labor. There's a difference. Not much of one from where I'm sitting. That got a laugh out of her, watery and pained but real. The afternoon bled into evening. The contractions got closer together, more painful. Celeste stopped joking and just focused on surviving each wave. Landon stayed beside her the entire time, letting her grip his hand and curse at him and cry when it got too bad. Around 7, the doctor came back in. Time to push. Already? Celeste looked terrified. Your body knows what to do. Just listen to it. What followed was the most intense hour of Landon's life. Celeste pushed and cried and screamed while the doctor and nurses coached her through it. Landon felt completely helpless, holding her hand and whispering encouragement that felt inadequate against the reality of what she was going through. I can see the head, the doctor said. One more push. You're almost there. I can't. Yes, you can, Landon said firmly. You're the strongest person I know. One more push and you get to meet your daughter. Celeste looked at him, sweat-soaked and exhausted, and something fierce flashed in her eyes. She bore down with everything she had left. And then the room filled with crying, high and sharp, and absolutely perfect. It's a girl, the doctor announced, lifting a tiny red-faced baby into the light. Celeste sobbed, reaching for her daughter with shaking hands. The nurses placed the baby on her chest, and Landon watched as Celeste's entire world narrowed to the tiny person in her arms. Hi, she whispered. Hi, baby girl. I'm your mom. The baby stopped crying at the sound of her voice, blinking up at Celeste with unfocused eyes. Landon felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd been holding closed for 4 years. He remembered this feeling, this overwhelming rush of love and terror, and absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same. She's perfect, Celeste breathed. Yeah, Landon agreed. She really is. Linda was crying openly, taking photos with her phone. The medical staff bustled around, cleaning and checking and documenting, but Celeste didn't notice any of it. She just stared at her daughter like she was the only thing in the universe. Do you have a name? One of the nurses asked. Celeste looked up at Landon. I was thinking Grace, for what I've been given. Grace is perfect. The nurse made a note on her chart. Welcome to the world, Grace Whitmore. They moved Celeste to a recovery room a few hours later. Linda went home to check on Jamie, promising to bring him by in the morning. Landon stayed, sitting in the chair beside Celeste's bed, while she dozed with Grace sleeping in her arms. Around midnight, Celeste woke up. You're still here. Where else would I be? Home, with your family. My family's at home, safe. You and Grace needed someone more. She looked down at the baby. I can't believe she's real, that I made this perfect tiny human. You did good. I was so scared. The whole time I thought I wouldn't be able to do it, that I'd freeze or panic or mess it up somehow. But you didn't. No. A small smile crossed her face. I didn't. Grace made a small sound in her sleep, and Celeste's expression melted into something so tender it hurt to watch. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything, for staying when everyone else left, for believing I could do this even when I didn't believe it myself. You would have been fine without me. Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out. She looked up at him. I know this is weird, this whole situation, but I need you to know that you saved my life. Not just today, every day since you showed up at my door in that storm. Somos dishing. Landon didn't know what to say to that, so he just took her free hand and held it. They sat like that for a long time, 2 broken people and a brand new baby, while the snow started to fall outside. And for the first time in a very long time, Landon let himself hope that maybe everything would actually be okay. The first 3 weeks with Grace were chaos in the best and worst ways possible. Celeste moved through those early days in a haze of exhaustion and overwhelming love, learning how to feed and change and comfort a tiny human who seemed determined to never sleep for more than 2 hours at a time. Landon's guest room became a makeshift nursery, filled with secondhand baby gear that Linda had somehow acquired from neighbors and friends. The house that had been quiet for years suddenly rang with crying at all hours, and nobody complained. Jamie was obsessed with the baby. He'd sit next to Celeste for hours, just watching Grace sleep, asking 1,000 questions about when she'd be big enough to play with him. Maybe when she's 1, Celeste said one afternoon, adjusting Grace in her arms. Or 2. Babies take a while to get interesting. She's already interesting, Jamie insisted. Look at her hands. They're so tiny, and he was right. Everything about Grace was impossibly small and perfect and terrifying. Celeste found herself checking on her constantly, making sure she was breathing, making sure she was warm enough, making sure she was real and safe and still there. Landon understood without being told. He'd show up in the doorway at 2 a.m. to find Celeste sitting in the rocking chair, just watching Grace sleep. She's fine, he'd say quietly. I know. I just need to check. I did the same thing with Jamie for months. Drove Sarah crazy. I can see why. But Celeste didn't stop checking. The town had opinions about the situation because small towns always did. Landon heard the whispers at the grocery store, saw the looks when he was out with Celeste and the baby. The single dad and the disgraced heiress playing house. Some people thought it was sweet. Others thought it was scandalous. Most just thought it was nobody's business but theirs. Linda shut down the gossip with the efficiency of someone who'd lived through worse. When her neighbor made a comment about that situation, Linda had smiled sweetly and said, "You mean the situation where a young mother has a safe place to raise her daughter? Yeah, terrible. We should probably kick her out so everyone feels better." The neighbor hadn't brought it up again, but the whispers got her back to Celeste anyway. She was sitting in the living room one Thursday afternoon feeding Grace when she brought it up. "People are talking." Landon looked up from the work invoice he'd been reviewing. "People always talk. They're saying we're together, that I moved in with you and now we're playing house. Does it bother you?" "It should, but mostly I'm just tired." Grace finished eating and Celeste shifted her to her shoulder, patting her back gently. "I used to care so much about what people thought, what they said about me. Now I can barely remember why it mattered. Because you were trying to prove something. To your family, to Bradley, to yourself." Landon set down the invoice. "Now you've got bigger things to worry about." Grace let out a small burp, and Celeste smiled despite herself. "Yeah, much bigger things." Jamie came running in from the backyard, his cheeks red from the cold. "Dad, can we build a snowman? Please?" "It's almost dark, buddy, but there's still light, and tomorrow all the good snow will be gone." Landon looked at Celeste, who waved him off. "Go, we're fine here." "You sure?" "I've been alone with a baby for 3 weeks. I think I can handle another hour." Outside, Landon and Jamie built a lopsided snowman while the sun set behind the neighbor's house. Jamie kept talking about Grace, about how cool it was to have a baby in the house, about whether she'd like playing in the snow when she got bigger. "Do you think Celeste is going to stay forever?" Jamie asked, packing snow around the snowman's middle. "I don't know, bud. That's up to her." "But do you want her to stay?" The question caught Landon off guard. "Why do you ask?" "And because you smile more now. Since she's been here, you and Grandma both do." Jamie looked up at him with those 2 wise eyes that sometimes made Landon forget his son was only 6. "And I like having them here, Grace and Celeste. It feels like we're a real family." "We were always a real family." "I know. But now we're a bigger family, and that's better." Landon didn't know how to explain that families were complicated, that Celeste was going through something hard and probably wouldn't stay once she got back on her feet, that getting attached was dangerous because nothing good lasted forever. So he just ruffled Jamie's hair and said, "Yeah, buddy, it is better." That night, after Jamie went to bed and Linda retired to her room, Landon found Celeste in the kitchen making tea. Grace was asleep in the bassinet by the table, swaddled tight. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Grace finally went down and my brain won't shut off." She poured hot water over the tea bag. "I keep thinking about what comes next. I can't stay here forever, but I have no money for rent, no job, no childcare. Every time I try to make a plan, I hit a wall. So don't make a plan yet, just focus on getting through each day. That's not sustainable. I need to figure this out." "Why? What's the rush?" Celeste turned to face him. "Because I'm living in your guest room with a newborn baby. Because your mother is doing my laundry and your son is entertaining my daughter. Because you're working extra jobs to make up for all the time you've spent helping me instead of taking paying work." Her voice cracked. Because I'm taking advantage of your kindness, and I don't know how to stop. You're not taking advantage of anything. You're accepting help. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, I'm a burden, a complication in your life that you didn't ask for. Landon crossed the kitchen and took the teacup from her hands, setting it on the counter. Look at me. She did reluctantly. You're not a burden. You're someone I care about who needed help. And yeah, it's been complicated and messy and nothing like I expected, but I don't regret any of it. He took her hands. You and Grace being here has been good for us, for me and Jamie and my mom. We were just going through the motions before. Now we're actually living again. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person and a 3-week-old baby. I'm not putting pressure on you. I'm telling you the truth. He squeezed her hands gently. Stay as long as you need to. Figure out your next steps when you're ready. Stop trying to run away from people who want to help you. Celeste's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to do that. My whole life, accepting help meant giving up control, meant letting someone else make decisions for me. Then learn a new way, where help is just help. No strings, no conditions, no hidden agenda. What if I can't? Then we'll figure it out together, like everything else. She pulled him into a hug, burying her face in his shoulder. He held her while she cried, feeling the tension drain out of her body in shaking waves. Grace stirred in the bassinet, but didn't wake. And for a moment, everything felt suspended in that quiet kitchen, just the three of them existing in a bubble of warmth against the cold world outside. When Celeste finally pulled back, her face was blotchy, but calmer. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for letting me in. She picked up her tea and took a sip, then made a face. It's cold now. I'll make you a new one. They stood together in the kitchen, making tea and talking about nothing important, while Grace slept and the house settled around them. And Landon realized with a start that this was what he wanted, not just for now, but for keeps. This woman and her daughter and the messy, complicated family they were building out of broken pieces. He just didn't know if Celeste wanted the same thing. January brought bitter cold and a letter from Bradley's lawyer. Celeste opened it at the kitchen table while Grace napped in her arms, her face going pale as she read. He's suing me, she said quietly. Landon looked up from his coffee. For what? Defamation. Says I've been spreading false information about him to mutual acquaintances, damaging his reputation. She laughed, sharp and bitter. He stole everything from me, and now he wants money for me telling people about it. That's insane. That's Bradley. He can't stand the idea of people knowing what he did. She set down the letter. The worst part is I haven't been telling people anything. I've barely talked to anyone from that part of my life. But he doesn't know that. He just assumes I'm out there destroying his reputation. What does the lawyer want? A retraction, a public apology, admission that I made false statements about his character. She looked at Landon. If I don't comply, he's filing suit for $200,000 in damages. Can he actually do that? He can try. Whether he'd win is another question, but fighting it would cost money I don't have. So either I apologize for telling the truth, or I go bankrupt trying to defend myself. Landon felt rage building in his chest. There has to be another option. If there is, I don't see it. Grace woke up fussing, and Celeste automatically started rocking her, making soothing sounds. The contrast was jarring, this woman who was so gentle and patient with her daughter, now being attacked by someone who'd already taken everything from her. I'll talk to a lawyer, Landon said. See what our options are. Landon, I didn't ask if you could afford it. I said I'd talk to a lawyer. This isn't your problem. Yeah, well, I'm making it my problem. He called 3 lawyers that afternoon. The first 2 wanted retainers he couldn't afford. The third, a woman named Patricia Chen, who'd helped him with some contract disputes years ago, agreed to look at the case for free. They met at her office the next day. Celeste brought Grace, who slept through the entire consultation in her carrier. Patricia read through Bradley's letter, her expression getting darker by the second. This is garbage. Pure intimidation tactics. Can he actually win? Celeste asked. Win? Probably not. Defamation requires proof of false statements and actual damages. But he can drag this out for months, maybe years. Make your life miserable and expensive. Patricia set down the letter. The question is whether you want to fight it or settle. I don't have money to fight. What about evidence? Proof of what he actually did? I have bank statements showing the transfers, emails about the offshore accounts, but nothing that directly proves he stole from me. Everything was technically legal, just morally bankrupt. Patricia drummed her fingers on the desk, thinking. Here's what I'd recommend. We send a response letter outlining your counterclaim. Fraud, theft, breach of fiduciary duty. Make it clear that if he wants to fight, we'll bring everything into the light. Discovery would be brutal for him. I thought you said I don't have a case. You don't have a strong criminal case, but in civil court, we could make his life very uncomfortable, and men like Bradley don't like being uncomfortable. Patricia smiled grimly. He's counting on you being too scared or too broke to fight back. Let's prove him wrong. Celeste looked at Landon. This could get expensive. I don't care. Landon, I said I don't care. He turned to Patricia. Write the letter. Whatever it costs, we'll figure it out. Patricia nodded. I'll have something drafted by tomorrow. In the meantime, document everything. Every interaction with Bradley, every email, every text. If this goes to court, we want a paper trail. Walking out of the office, Celeste was quiet. Grace had woken up and was making small cooing sounds, and Celeste focused all her attention on the baby, avoiding Landon's eyes. Talk to me, Landon said when they reached the truck. You shouldn't have done that. Done what? Hired a lawyer to protect you from your abusive ex? Agreed to pay money you don't have for a fight that isn't yours. She buckled Grace into the car seat with shaking hands. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You getting pulled down with me. I'm not getting pulled down. I'm choosing to help. Why? Why do you keep choosing this? Choosing me? She turned to face him, and there were tears in her eyes. I'm a mess, Landon. I have nothing to offer you except problems and a baby that's not yours, and a life that's completely falling apart. Why would you want any of this? Because I love you, Landon thought. But he couldn't say it. Not when she was already overwhelmed and scared and fighting battles on every front. Because you're worth fighting for, he said instead. You and Grace both. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got. They drove home in tense silence. That night, Landon lay awake thinking about everything that had happened since that first storm. About the woman who'd been standing alone beside a foreclosure notice, trying to hold her world together with nothing but stubborn pride. About the way she'd looked at him when Grace was born, like he was the only solid thing in her universe. About how badly he wanted to keep being that solid thing, even knowing it might destroy him. Patricia's letter went out 2 days later. Bradley's response came within 24 hours. A furious voicemail demanding Celeste call him immediately, followed by 3 texts that escalated from angry to threatening. He's scared, Patricia said when Celeste forwarded the messages. Which means we're on the right track. But being on the right track didn't make the waiting any easier. Celeste jumped every time her phone rang. She barely slept, and when she did, she had nightmares about losing Grace, about losing the case, about ending up homeless and alone. Landon found her one night sitting in the dark nursery just watching Grace sleep. You okay? No, but I will be. She didn't look away from the baby. I keep thinking about what Jamie said, about us being a family. What about it? He's 6 years old and he already understands something I'm still trying to learn. That family isn't about blood or marriage or any of the traditional markers. It's about showing up, staying. She finally looked at him. You've shown up for me more times than I can count. You and Jamie and Linda. You've become my family, and I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it. Just let it be. But what happens when this is over? When Bradley's lawsuit goes away and I finally get back on my feet? Do I move out and we all just go back to how things were before? Is that what you want? No. The word came out fierce and certain. I don't want to go back. I want to stay here, in this life we're building. But I'm terrified that I'm seeing something that isn't really there. That you're just being kind and I'm mistaking kindness for something more. Landon crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. It's not just kindness, Celeste. Then what is it? It's me waking up every morning grateful that you're here. It's Jamie asking me every night if you and Grace are staying. It's my mom telling me I'm an idiot if I let you walk away. He took her hand. It's me falling in love with you and not knowing how to tell you without scaring you off. Celeste's breath caught. You love me? Yeah, I do. Have for a while now, I think. Maybe since that first night when you cried on my shoulder and let me see how scared you were. He smiled despite the fear tightening his chest. I know the timing's terrible. I know you've got enough to deal with without me adding to it. But you asked what this was, and that's the truth. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I love you too. I've been trying so hard not to, trying to keep some distance so it wouldn't hurt so much when this ended. But I can't. I can't stop loving you. Then don't. She pulled him up and kissed him, desperate and gentle all at once. Grace stirred in her sleep but didn't wake, and they held each other in the dark nursery while the world continued outside, cold and uncertain but suddenly less frightening. When they finally pulled apart, Celeste was smiling through her tears. This is crazy. Yeah, completely insane. We barely know each other. I know you're strong and stubborn, and you make terrible tea. I know you love your daughter more than anything. I know you're terrified of being weak, but you're brave enough to ask for help anyway. He touched her face gently. That's enough for me. I know you're kind and patient, and you fix things that other people would walk away from. I know you love your son so much it makes my heart hurt. I know you saved me, even though you didn't have to. She kissed him again, softer this time. That's enough for me too. They stayed up talking until Grace woke up hungry, and then Celeste fed her while Landon made tea that was actually drinkable. And somewhere in the quiet hours of early morning, the fear that had been suffocating Celeste for months finally started to ease. Bradley's lawsuit fell apart in spectacular fashion 2 weeks later. Patricia had filed a countersuit that included fraud charges and a request for financial records going back 3 years. Bradley's lawyer withdrew within 48 hours, and Bradley himself sent a terse email agreeing to drop all claims if Celeste agreed to do the same. We won, Patricia said over the phone. Just like that? Celeste couldn't quite believe it. Just like that. He knew he couldn't survive discovery. Too many skeletons in too many closets. Patricia's satisfaction was audible. You're free of him, legally and financially. After she hung up, Celeste sat staring at her phone for a long moment. Then she started laughing, deep, gasping laughs that turned into sobs halfway through. Landon found her in the kitchen, Grace in her arms, crying and laughing simultaneously. It's over, she managed. He's gone. He can't touch us anymore. I know, I heard. Patricia called me too. I can't believe it. After everything, it's just over. Not just over. You won. She looked down at Grace, who was staring up at her with wide, curious eyes. Yeah, I guess I did. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and bringing the first green shoots pushing through the frozen ground. Celeste had been living with them for almost 4 months, and nobody talked about her leaving anymore. Her things had migrated from the guest room throughout the house. Baby toys in the living room, her favorite coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet, her jacket hanging beside Landon's by the front door. One Saturday morning in March, Landon woke up to find her sitting on the porch with Grace, watching the sunrise. You're up early, he said, sitting beside them. Couldn't sleep. Too much going on in my head. She shifted Grace to her other arm. I've been thinking about what comes next. Really thinking, not just panicking. And I want to go back to school, finish my degree. Maybe become a teacher like your wife wanted to be. She looked at him. I know it'll be hard with Grace, and I don't have money for tuition yet, but there are programs. Financial aid. I've been researching. That's amazing. I also want to look for an apartment, something small, but mine. Close enough that you can still see Grace whenever you want, but far enough that I can prove to myself that I can stand on my own. Something cold settled in Landon's chest. You want to move out? Eventually, not right now, but soon. She must have seen something in his face because she reached over and took his hand. I'm not running away. I'm moving forward. There's a difference. I know. I just got used to you being here. I got used to it too. But I need to know I can do this. That I can be a mom and build a life and not fall apart the second things get hard. She squeezed his hand. I need to know I'm staying because I want to, not because I have nowhere else to go. Landon understood that. Had felt it himself after Sarah died, that desperate need to prove he could handle things alone before he could let anyone else back in. Okay, he said, but I'm helping you apartment hunt and move and set up furniture. I wouldn't expect anything less. They found a place in April, a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it had good light and a park across the street and rent. Celeste could almost afford with the part-time job she'd found working remotely for an educational nonprofit. Moving day was chaos. Jamie cried because he didn't want them to leave, then got excited when he realized he could visit whenever he wanted. Linda packed enough food to feed them for a week and pretended her eyes weren't wet when she hugged Celeste goodbye. Landon carried boxes and assembled furniture and tried not to think about how quiet his house would be without Grace's crying. Celeste's terrible tea and all the small chaotic moments that had made the last 5 months feel like living instead of just surviving. When everything was moved in and Jamie and Linda had gone home, Landon found Celeste standing in the middle of her new living room, Grace asleep in her arms. "You did it," he said. "I really did." She looked around at the secondhand furniture and the boxes still waiting to be unpacked. "It's not much. It's yours. That makes it everything." She turned to him and there was something fierce and determined in her eyes. "I need you to understand something. Me moving out doesn't mean I'm moving on. This isn't me running away or pushing you out or any of the things I know you're worried about. I'm not worried. You're a terrible liar." She set Grace down in the bassinet and crossed to him. "I love you. I love Jamie. I love what we've built together, but I needed to know I could stand on my own first. Does that make sense?" "Yeah, it does." "Good. Because now that I know I can, I want to tell you something." She took his hands. "I want this, us. Not because I need you to save me, but because I choose you. Because you're the best man I've ever known, and I want to build a life with you, if you still want that." "Are you serious?" "Completely. Terrifyingly. I know it's fast and messy, and nothing about this has been traditional, but when has anything about us been traditional?" She smiled. "So, what do you say? Want to try building something real with a woman who makes terrible tea and comes with a very demanding infant?" Landon pulled her close and kissed her. Landon pulled her close and pouring 4 months of fear and hope and desperate love into it. When they broke apart, they were both smiling. "Yeah," he said, "I really do." The next 6 months weren't easy. Celeste juggled school and work and single motherhood while Landon balanced his contracting business with helping her whenever she needed it. Jamie fell completely in love with Grace, appointing himself her official big brother and protector. Linda babysat more than any grandmother should have to and complained cheerfully the entire time. But slowly, steadily, they built something that felt like forever. Sunday dinners at Landon's house, weekend trips to the park with both kids, quiet evenings at Celeste's apartment where they'd fall asleep on the couch while Grace played on her activity mat. On a warm day in October, almost a year after that first storm, Landon pulled up to the house on Meadowbrook Lane. The bank had finally sold it, and the new owners were doing renovations. Celeste sat in the passenger seat staring at the mansion that had almost destroyed her. "You okay?" Landon asked. "Yeah, I think I am." She watched a construction crew unload supplies from a truck. "It's strange. I spent so long fighting for this place, and now it just feels like a house. Nothing special, nothing worth dying for." It was never about the house. No, it was about proving I could make it on my own, that I didn't need my family or Bradley or anyone else to define me. She turned to look at him. "Turns out I was wrong. I did need people, just different people than I expected." Grace made a sound from the back seat and Celeste smiled. At 10 months old, she was starting to look more like a little person than a baby, curious and determined and absolutely fearless. "Ready to go?" Landon asked. "Yeah, let's go home." They drove back to Landon's house where Jamie was waiting on the porch with a sign he'd made that said, "Welcome home" in crayon. Inside, Linda had made a pot roast, and they all sat around the dinner table together, this strange patchwork family that had been built from broken pieces and stubborn hope. After dinner, when the kids were playing in the living room and Linda was cleaning up, Celeste pulled Landon aside. "I have something for you." She handed him a small box. Inside was a key. "It's to my apartment," she said. "I know you already have one, but this is different. This is me saying that my space is your space, that I want you there, not just visiting, but belonging." Landon turned the key over in his hand. "You sure about this?" more sure than I've been about anything in a long time. She took his hand. I know we're taking things slow. I know we haven't talked about marriage or moving in together or any of the big steps, but I wanted you to know that when I'm ready for those things, it's going to be with you. Nobody else. Just you. I can wait as long as you need. I know. That's one of the million reasons I love you. By Masbu'taran. From the living room came the sound of Jamie's laughter and Grace's delighted shriek. Linda called something about dessert being ready, and standing there in the hallway with Celeste's hand in his and her key in his pocket, Landon realized something important. He'd spent 4 years thinking that happiness was something you lost and never got back. That loving someone meant preparing for the inevitable moment when they were taken away. But looking at Celeste now, at the life they were building together out of ruins and rain and raw, stubborn refusal to give up, he understood that he'd been wrong. Happiness wasn't something you lost or found. It was something you built, piece by piece, day by day, with people who showed up and stayed even when staying was hard. It was messy and imperfect, and nothing like the fairy tales promised. But it was real in a way those perfect stories could never be. And maybe that was the whole point. Maybe the storms didn't come to destroy you. Maybe they came to strip away everything that wasn't essential, leaving only the truth of who you were and who you loved and what you were willing to fight for. Celeste had fought for her daughter, for her independence, for her right to build a life on her own terms. Landon had fought for the chance to help someone the way he'd needed help when his world fell apart. And together, they'd built something that neither of them could have created alone. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, and Celeste had driven back to her apartment with Grace, Landon sat on his porch watching the stars. His phone buzzed. "We made it," Celeste's text said. "Grace is asleep. I'm drinking terrible tea, wishing you were here. I can be there in 10 minutes, he typed back. "I know, but you don't have to be. That's what makes it matter." He smiled and typed, I love you too, see you tomorrow, and every day after that." He sat there for a while longer, thinking about the woman who'd stood alone in the rain beside a foreclosure notice, refusing to break even when everything told her she should, thinking about how far they'd both come from that night, and how far they still had to go. The key to her apartment was warm in his pocket, and Landon knew with absolute certainty that eventually there would be more keys, more doors opening, more steps forward into a future they'd build together. But that could wait. Right now, he had a son sleeping upstairs and a mother who loved him and a woman who chose him every single day. He had work in the morning and dinner plans tomorrow night, and 1,000 small, ordinary moments stretching out ahead of him. And after years of just surviving, that felt like everything. Because the truth nobody tells you about storms is that they don't just destroy, they also reveal. They show you who you are when everything else is stripped away. They show you who stays when staying is the hardest thing you could possibly do. Celeste had stayed when her world collapsed. Landon had stayed when walking away would have been easier. And together, they'd proven that sometimes the things that nearly break you are also the things that save you. The storm that had brought them together was long over, but the family they'd become because of it was just beginning. And that, Landon thought as he stood and headed inside, was a story worth living.